We're going to look at the importance of monetary expansion and inflation in this lecture in determining aggregate expenditure or a sustained increase in aggregate expenditure in the economy. So as we know, using demand management theory, supply responds to demand. And so for supply to increase, aggregate demand must increase. So aggregate demand must increase for aggregate supply to increase under this theory. So that's where monetary policy comes in. It suggests that as aggregate demand increases, then the aggregate supply or economic growth of the economy would therefore increase. And when economic growth increases, we can see that the economy would therefore experience a higher material living standard. So this video will focus on the importance of monetary expansion, so the increase in the volume of money, and therefore why inflation is important to the economy, so why the increase in the general level of prices is important. So to look at this concept, we're going to assume that we know that every transaction in the marketplace has a buyer or seller. So if someone wants to buy a car, then there's someone who's going to be willing to sell that car. So in every transaction in this market economy, there must be a buyer and a seller. And so what this means is the value of the sale, say the car, must be equal to the value of the purchase. So in this economy, this market economy, the value of every purchase must equal the value of every sale. Every purchase equals every sale. So what we can do is we can use a quantity equation to represent this mathematically. And this is known as what I just said, the quantity equation. Now this quantity equation is essentially M times V equals P times Y. Now these may just be numbers per numeracy, but let me explain what these different pronumerals actually stand for. These symbols actually stand for. So we have M, I'm just going to note here, M is the quantity of money available. So that is the total supply of money in the economy. And V is what is known as the velocity of circulation. Now this is a fairly new concept and a very economic concept that we have to go through. So what the velocity of circulation is, we can use a simple mathematical equation to figure out the velocity of circulation. So let's say in the economy we have $100, and we only have $100 in this economy. We have person A who owns this $100. Person A owns $100. And what person A wants is to buy a book. And person B sells this book. And so what happens in the market economy is that person A hands over $100 to person B, and person B hands over the book. Now person B doesn't want this $100. He wants a computer. And let's say the value of this computer in this economy is also $100. And person C owns this computer, and he wants the $100 because he wants to use it for something else. So what happens here is person B, who now has $100 because he's exchanged the book for $100, is now going to give the money to person C, and person C would give the computer back to person B. So assuming that the transactions end here, we can see that the value of the economy or the total GDP, or gross domestic product in this economy, is the value of the book and also the value of the computer. So GDP would equal $200. However, we only see that there is only $100 worth of money in this economy. So money supply equals $100. And so therefore the velocity of circulation is the number of times money is used or turned over against the purchase of output. And since the purchase of output is $200, the velocity of money, or V, is in fact 2. So 200 divided by 100, which is 2. So as we can see, GDP growth can occur even with money at a constant of $100. GDP growth can be $200, and it can even be $300 if person C decides to sell or to buy something else using $100 and spend the money. So that is the velocity of circulation. And by theory, we can see that the velocity of circulation, so how many times money is turned over, multiplied by the quantity of money, so how much money we have to turn over. So this being how much money, and this being how many times we use the money. We can see that P being the general price level, if we multiply that by Y, which is income or output, we can see that the amount of money we have multiplied by how many times we use it is the same as the general price multiplied by the output, which is also GDP, or the value of GDP in the economy. So as we can see, money 100 times 2 equals the price of the good, which is 100, multiplied by how many goods there are here, Y, which is 2, the book and the computer. Okay, so we've understood the concept of the velocity of money, so let's rub this out. I don't really need this anymore. And so that is the quantity equation of money. Now, there is a problem to the velocity of circulation because we can only use money so many times. We can't spend, say, $100 100 million times because it becomes A, impractical, and 2, we just can't spend money that many times. And so what this means is there is an upper limit to V, to this V here, or the velocity of circulation. There is an upper limit. And so since aggregate demand, or expenditure, is related to this idea of P times Y and M times V, which is money times velocity, we can see that for aggregate demand to increase, since we're using demand side management policy, for this idea of aggregate demand to increase aggregate supply consequently, then the velocity of money, or M times V, this must increase. And since there is an upper limit to the velocity of money, we can see that for M times V to increase, M has to increase, and M being the money supply of the economy. And so now that all economists agree that there must be a sustained increase in monetary growth or monetary expansion in order for aggregate demand and therefore aggregate supply to increase, because there is this upper limit to V. So as a result, we can see that because the money supply increases, therefore the worth of money decreases. So as we can see, if we use a simple demand supply analysis, just chuck it here, simple demand and supply analysis, if the quantity or the supply of money increases, supply increases, therefore the value of money would decrease. So the value of money would decrease from P1 to P2. And when the value of money decreases, this is what inflation tells us. It tells us that our purchasing power has decreased and that the overall level of prices in the economy has increased. So for this equation to again once balance, MV equals PY when M increases, and assuming that output stays the same in the short run, we will see that the overall price of the economy would increase. So sustained inflation will result from this any increase in the money supply in excess of output. So if, for example, production, or Y, increases along with the money supply, then there will be no inflation. But if the monetary supply increases and inflation increases at a lower rate, then this average price, P, must have increased. This is extremely important for economic growth in the economy, because aggregate expenditure determines aggregate supply in the short run. And so that is the importance of monetary expansion and inflation, how there must be a sustained increase in inflation as well as a increase in monetary growth to increase the output or GDP of an economy.